Thank you very much, Contingency Medical, for sponsoring this video. Hello, YouTubers. Alaska Prepper here. Ladies and gentlemen, there is absolutely no way that things get better, nor that they be resolved. There is only one way that we can go when it comes to the financials of not only the United States of America, but really the world. Almost every country finds itself in the same place that we ourselves here in the U.S. find ourselves, but I would dare to say not to the same extent. I wanted to take a few minutes with you today to actually show you the numbers so that you can see for yourselves how it is that there is absolutely no way out of this. There may be a way out of a cataclysm, meaning that the U.S. defaults and we enter into a worldwide depression that lasts a decade by allowing the government to print more money and allowing them to extend the debt ceiling and continue to print more and more and more, thereby stealing the wealth right from under the labor that it cost you to gain that wealth that you were able to build up so that you can be able to retire with a little bit of dignity. Right? It may not be to the extent of all of these fat cats up in Washington that retire in $10 million yachts or $50 million yachts, but one that suits you and that allows you to stay dignified in your golden years. So I'm putting out this message because it's kind of a different way to show you than ways that I've seen others show on YouTube, and I haven't shown it in this way as well. But what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at this quote really quick, just so that you understand that from the very beginning, ladies and gentlemen, the game was against you and for the very wealthy. The game was rigged from the beginning for the very wealthy, and it was going to be paid by you, the average person on the streets. I've partnered with Contingency Medical because they provide us the opportunity to purchase emergency medicines that include antibiotics. Just like having a good water filtration system in your home is paramount, I believe that having a set of personalized emergency medicines is just as important. With Contingency Medical, you can legally obtain prescription antibiotics that will be prescribed to you by a real doctor and filled by a real pharmacist in a real pharmacy. The process is very easy and only takes a few minutes. Take a look at the link and a code that will save you some cash under the description of this video, and I will leave it on a pinned comment. Thank you very much, Contingency Medical, for sponsoring this video. Now, many of you have probably heard about John Maynard Keynes, and many of you probably haven't. And from what I understand, John Maynard Keynes is called the father of Keynesian economics. And I wanted you to hear this quote that came from him. Now, John Maynard Keynes was asked prior to his death, he was asked, is this system going to last? The one by which the government took on, Keynesian, meaning printing money out of thin air and not having anything that backs up a currency that has tangible value to it. And what he said was, paraphrasing, I don't care, I'll be dead long before it fails. Well, this is a quote from him that pretty much solidifies that you've been stolen from your entire lives. And I would argue to say that before you were even born. Because while you were in your mother's belly, you were already garnering a debt that you were going to have to be responsible for as soon as you were born. Here he says, by a continuing process of inflation, government can confiscate secretly and unobserved an important part of the wealth of their citizens. And you have to understand, this is the father of Keynesian economics, and Keynesian economics is grounded on exactly that, on allowing the inflation of a monetary supply. And the inflation is done by who? By the government, which therefore steals your wealth in a way that many people don't understand. That's why here he says secretly. In a way that many people don't understand. Well, how is it that when government prints money out of thin air, how is it that that steals my wealth? How is it that that steals my purchasing power? Well, ladies and gentlemen, the reason is because the money that you made, the money that you earned through a job, you earned it. You worked for it. There was labor in exchange for that money. When the government prints money out of thin air, no one earned it. It just came into existence by edict. Because someone in government said, let it be, do it, because I'm saying do it. And then when that money is created and no one had worked for it, where do you think it gains its value from? It gains its value from the dollars that you've already worked into existence. That is why when the government prints a lot of money, or when they print any money, that is why you can buy less at the grocery store. That is why your standard of living goes down, meaning that you now have to work more in order to afford the same things that you were able to afford in the past. Take a look at how many Americans are now reporting that they don't trust the banking system. I think upwards of about 50% of Americans don't trust the banking system anymore because they see these banks failing, and then they see the government continuing to bail them out with our money. Take a look at how many Americans cannot afford a $500 or $1,000 emergency because they just don't have that emergency fund. Think of how many Americans live paycheck to paycheck. They're literally one paycheck away from not being able to pay their rent. Ladies and gentlemen, this does not end well, and that is why we must prepare. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so I wanted to go over this chart with you that many of us have seen, but I probably would bet that many people haven't really looked at all of the numbers on this chart, which is the U.S. debt clock. Right? You can go to this. I'll leave a link to it on a pinned comment. That way you can go to it right away and check it out for yourselves and actually read what every number means. And this is where I'm going to get at the main point that I'm trying to make, is that there is no getting out of this. There is no good end to this, and it is why you must prepare the best that you can. The first thing we want to look at here is the national debt. And the national debt is what we owe as a nation, right? I know that this is pretty elementary to some of you, but to some people, they may not know, right? So the national debt is what we owe as a nation. It's the public debt of the United States, either to ourselves because some Americans bought bonds, let's say, from the government, or to foreign debt holders, to foreign countries that have purchased bonds and such from the United States government. But this 31.7 trillion, ladies and gentlemen, what you have to understand that the most important thing about that number is not the size of the number per se, but the most important thing about that is that that will never, ever be paid off. It could never be paid off. So if people understood that we are in a system that can never end as long as we continue to sustain it through the payment of taxes and our labor, this 31.7 can never be paid off, and it will only get bigger year after year after year. Right? And the reason why it can never ever be paid off is because what we exist in, what we are governed by in our financial system, is a system that is debt based. That means that in order for us to be able to spend, we have to borrow. That's the only way that we can spend, is if we borrow. And I don't mean as you and me personally, but as a nation. Every one of these that you all have is a debt. The fiat currency notes that you hold, known as the Federal Reserve notes, they don't even belong to you, ladies and gentlemen. You're just borrowing these debt units, and you actually work for them. People think that it belongs to them. No, it doesn't. If you have $100,000 in the bank, go and see if you can take it out. All right, go to the bank and say, yeah, I want to withdraw $100,000, and see how much hassle you get, and see if you can even withdraw them. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so that debt can never be paid off. The other very important thing to know about the national debt is that the higher that the interest rates are, for example, if you take a look at our 2-year bond, right, or our 5-year bond, 10-year bond, 30-year bond, the higher that our bonds that are being sold into the free market, the higher that the interest rates are, the more that we are going to be on the hook to pay interest on the debt. So if I remember correctly, from doing a tiny bit of research, about 30% of all of the debt that we owe. So about $10 trillion or so, about 30% of $31.7 trillion. So roughly $10 trillion or so, that is going to have to be paid back or rolled over here in the next 12 to 18 months, I believe. I remember reading, right? So think about when we roll that debt over, how much interest is going to be now that we are taking out debt, new debt, at an interest rate of above 3%, when in the past we were taking out debt at an interest rate of near zero, right, or 1%. It is going to be a huge number that is going to add to our mandatory expenditures of interest. Because if we don't pay that interest every time that we owe it, then we're going to default. All right, we'll default. So this is a huge number that you should really take a look at, but not because of the number itself, but because of the implications of that number. Number one, it can never be paid back, ever. And number two, the higher it gets and the higher that our interest rates are on our bonds, the more that we, the people, will be on the hook to service that debt. And of course, here we can see that the debt per citizen, they take the number of U.S. citizens, 334 million, right? And then they divide it into our debt, and it comes out to roughly $95,000 per citizen. But it's not per citizen that really matters. It's per citizen that pays taxes. So per taxpayer, $250,000, ladies and gentlemen. And these numbers are not even the big numbers that you should be worried about. The next one that I'm going to concentrate on here is U.S. federal spending, the official amount of the U.S. federal spending within any given year. So right now, it's at a little bit over $6 trillion. What's the problem with that? The problem with that is that we only collect, if you take a look over here, we only collect 4.6 trillion in taxes. So the delta, or the difference between what we collect in taxes and what we spend, is this right here, is our deficit. And this is a number that's going to continue to be added to our national debt, all right, unless we get our spending under control. And how many of you think that our government is going to get spending out of control? More than likely not. They haven't done it yet, and it doesn't seem like they want to do it. Right? Let's go ahead and take a look at some other numbers that are going to blow your mind away, ladies and gentlemen. This is incredible. So, ladies and gentlemen, take a look at this. Currency and credit derivatives now. Right? The best way that I can explain what a derivative is like a bet. Right, like if somebody makes a bet with you for whatever it is, that's kind of like what a derivative is. Or for example, another good explanation of what a derivative is that a paper contract for gold is like a derivative for gold, because the real gold doesn't really exist. So whenever that contract, whenever they want to cash that contract out for the real stuff, for the real gold, they can't do it. They have to default because that gold does not exist. So that's kind of like a derivative, right? So look at how much we have in currency and credit derivatives right now as I'm making this video. $651 trillion. Right, ladies and gentlemen, $651 trillion. Now let's say that only half of these derivatives wanted to cash out. Right, let's just say that only half of them wanted to cash out. Where is that money going to come from? It doesn't exist. Those dollars do not exist. They're not even in existence right now. So where's that money coming from? Which means that if the derivatives market ever blows up, we would have a liquidity issue that would be, in contrast to what's happening now with the banks, would be like an atomic bomb compared to a firecracker. That's what that would mean, ladies and gentlemen. So the money just doesn't exist. We've allowed this to escape our grasp as far as money creation in the form of bets with money that doesn't even exist. It's incredible if you want to think about it that way. So let's go ahead and take a look at the last thing that I'm going to cover with you here. And it's this bottom line right here. Social Security liability. What does that mean? It means the amount of money that the government owes in Social Security going forward, all right? These are the Social Security promises that have been made. Let's see what it reads up here. Up here it says Social Security liability is based on current tax and funding inputs and on projections employing these assumptions using generally accepted accounting principles. So it means that if we continue to collect what we're collecting now, and we continue to have the number of people on Social Security that die off, and then the number of people that come on, and the payments that we have to make, and the adjustments on interest on inflation that we have to make year over year, about how much are we going to owe? Right here, unfunded liability. This is unfunded. That's why it's in the red. $22 trillion. Or $22.6 trillion we are in a hole for Social Security. What does this mean to you? This means that this is on the back of your future labor and the future labor of your children and their children and their children to pay. Right? Medicare liability, $35.3 trillion. Same thing. Total U.S. unfunded liabilities, ladies and gentlemen. If you thought that our national debt was big, take a look at our total unfunded liability. $187 trillion. How does this end? What do you think? Do you think that we have another 50 years on this same monetary system? Do you think we only have another year, another month? Whatever it is that you think, ladies and gentlemen, I would recommend highly that you prepare for that, because this does not end well. When does it end? I can't tell you with specificity when this ends, but all I know is that it doesn't end well. Now, let's say that we do have that great reset, right? And they reset the dollar and they reset all of the debt. It's happened before. Right? Just people haven't called it a great reset in the past. Take a look at 1971. We had a reset when Nixon took us off the gold standard. That was a reset of our monetary system. Right? Look at all the inflation that happened then. Who lost on that deal? During that reset in 1971, who lost on that deal? Was it the American people, or was it the wealthy people and the government? I would say that it was the average American person who was a wage earner or a salary earner that lost on that deal. Look at a reset that we had that no one's really called a reset, but in my opinion it was, in 2008. In 2008, they started doing something that we've never experienced before in the financial system, and that was quantitative easing. So in my opinion, that was a reset because it reset the value of all of the dollars to a great extent. Look at all of the money, new money that they printed since 2008 till today. I would say that is probably about 3/4 or more of all of the money that's ever existed in our country since its inception. So I would say that that was kind of a reset because we started doing something that we never done before that gave the government even more power and gave them the ability to steal our wealth even more than they've been doing in the past. If you take a look at 1933, they had a great reset in 1933 when FDR confiscated the gold from the people, and then once he had as much as he could get his hands on by threatening the people with jail or with a fine if they kept their gold. I think anything over 4 or 5 ounces they couldn't keep. They had to turn into the government in exchange for $20.67 for every ounce of gold. Well, once he took in all the gold and he made it illegal for the average public to hold, what did he do? He revalued the price of gold to $35 an ounce instead of $20.67 an ounce. And what happened? It made all of those dollar bills that he gave the people for their gold, for turning in their gold, it made all of those dollar bills worth about 70% less than what they were worth before he repriced gold. That was a big reset as well. But in all of the examples that I just noted to you, who won and who lost during all of those resets of the past? It wasn't the American people. Maybe it was the very wealthy, and the government was able to continue to have power over the people by doing those resets. But it was definitely not the American people. So I tell you now that before this next reset, or whatever it's called in the future, should you be prepared for that? so that you can be able to feed your family and not have to depend on someone else to give you a handout because you thought everything was going to be all right. Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, everything's not going to be all right. And you need to prepare for what's coming. All right? Not trying to scare anyone. It's just reality, and it's the truth. All you have to do is open your eyes and see what's going on. I'm going to go ahead and leave it at that. Let me say thank you again to Contingency Medical for sponsoring this video. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you have a great weekend. God bless every one of you. God bless America. I'm Alaska Prepper. I'm out.